I am now prepared to rule on the question of privilege raised on March 26th by the member for Langley regarding the presentation of a member's statement pursuant to Standing Order 31. Je remercie l'honorable député de Langley d'avoir soulevé cette question, de même que l'honorable whip en chef du gouvernement, l'honorable leader à la Chambre de l'opposition officielle, l'honorable leader à la Chambre du Parti libéral, ainsi que les députés de Vegreville Wainwright, de Saanich Gulf Islands, de Lethbridge, de Winnipeg Sud, d'Edmonton St. Albert, de Brampton West, de Kitchener Centre, de Nouveau Brunswick Sud-West, de Wellington Halton Hills, de Glengarry Prescott Russell, de Surrey Sud White Rock Cloverdale, de Medicine Hat, de West Vancouver Sunshine Coast Sea to Sky Country, d'Halifax, et de Thunder Bay Superior Nord, pour le commentaire. In raising his question of privilege, the member for Langley explained that shortly before he was to rise during statements by members on March 20th, he was notified by his party that he could no longer make his statement because, as he put it, quote, the topic was not approved, unquote. In making his case, he argued that the privilege of freedom of speech is designed to allow members to discharge their responsibility to ensure that their constituents are represented. While the member accepted the practice of parties submitting lists of members to the Speaker, he objected to this being managed in such a way that the equal right to speak could be removed. He stated that, quote, if at any time that right and privilege to make an SO31 on an equal basis in this House is removed, I believe I have lost my privilege of equal right that I have in this House, unquote. He further argued that, ultimately, it is only the Speaker who has the authority to remove a member's opportunity to speak, and that the equal opportunity of every member to make statements pursuant to Standing Order 31 must be guaranteed. In his intervention, the Chief Government Whip reminded the House that all recognized parties resort to the use of speaking lists, and that, quote, the practice for many years in this House is for the Speaker to follow the guidance provided by the parties, unquote. He added that since the preparation of lists is an internal affair of party caucuses, it is not something the Speaker ought to get involved in. De son côté, le leader à la Chambre de l'opposition a fait valoir que le rôle du président consiste notamment à faire la part des choses entre les tensions qui surviennent naturellement entre un député et son parti politique et le droit du député de prendre la parole au Parlement. Il a ensuite ajouté, et je cite, la question porte sur la nécessité pour les députés de pouvoir s'exprimer librement au nom de ceux qu'ils représentent. Fin de la citation. Il a cité à l'appui un passage se trouve à la page 89 de la procédure et les usages de la Chambre des communes, deuxième édition, et je cite, le droit de loin le plus important qui soit accordé aux députés est celui de l'exercice de la liberté de parole dans le cadre des délibérations parlementaires. Cependant, il a également fait remarquer que, étant donné la pratique bien ancrée selon laquelle les whips choisissent les députés qui prennent la parole, jumelée à l'absence de disposition du règlement permettant explicitement au président d'intervenir dans le processus, la présidence devra sans doute bénéficier du bien vouloir et de l'appui de la Chambre si elle souhaite intervenir. Several other members intervened in support of the member for Langley, while another echoed the comments of the Chief Government Whip. For his part, the member for New Brunswick Southwest suggested that I should expand my review of this matter to include not just lists for statements by members, but also for question period. Tout d'abord, je souhaite rappeler à la Chambre le rôle de la présidence en matière de questions de privilèges. À la page 181 de l'ouvrage d'O'Brien et de Bosque, il est écrit, et je cite, on attache une grande importance aux allégations d'atteinte aux privilèges parlementaires. Le rôle du président se limite à décider si la question qu'a soulevée le député est de nature à autoriser celui-ci à proposer une motion qui aura priorité sur toute autre affaire à l'ordre du jour de la Chambre. Autrement dit, que le président pourra considérer de prime abord comme une question de privilège. Le cas échéant, la Chambre devra immédiatement prendre la question en considération. C'est finalement la Chambre qui établira s'il y a eu atteinte au privilège ou outrage. Fin de la citation. I also wish to address what seems to be a widespread misconception about the role of the Speaker in matters of this kind. Several members have used sports analogies to describe me as a referee or league convener. Perhaps there are elements of a referee role for the Speaker, but with one important difference. There is no league that appoints the Speaker to enforce rules from on high in a vacuum. Instead, here in the House of Commons, the members elect the Speaker from among the membership to apply rules they themselves have devised and can amend. Thus, it is only with the active participation of the members themselves that the Speaker, who requires the support and goodwill of the House in order to carry out the duties of the office, can apply the rules. As is stated in O'Brien and Bosque at page 307, quote, despite the considerable authority of the office, the Speaker may exercise only those powers conferred upon him or her by the House within the limits established by the House itself. Dans leurs interventions, plusieurs députés ont souligné à juste titre l'importance fondamentale de la liberté de parole pour l'exercice de leurs fonctions. À la page 89 de la procédure et les usages de la Chambre des communes, deuxième édition, la liberté de parole dont jouissent les députés est décrite comme, et je cite, un droit fondamental sans lequel ils, les députés, ne pourraient remplir convenablement leurs fonctions. Cette liberté leur permet d'intervenir sans crainte dans les débats de la Chambre, de traiter des sujets qu'ils jugent pertinents et de dire tout ce qui, à leur avis, doit être dit pour sauvegarder l'intérêt du pays et combler les aspirations de leurs électeurs. The Speaker's role in safeguarding this very privilege is set out in O'Brien and Bosque at page 308. The duty of the Speaker is to ensure that the right of members to free speech is protected and exercised to the fullest possible extent, unquote. This last citation is particularly important since it highlights a key reality, namely that there are inherent limits to the privilege of freedom of speech. Aside from the well-known prohibitions on unparliamentary language, the need to refer to other members by title, the rules on repetition and relevance, the sub judice constraints, and other limitations designed to ensure that discourse is conducted in a civil and courteous manner, the biggest limitation of all is the availability of time. I need not remind the House that each and every sitting day, a vast majority of members are not able to make a statement pursuant to Standing Order 31, as there simply is not enough time available. It is likely for this reason that the Standing Order states that members may, not shall, be recognized to make statements. Hence, while many members in this instance have spoken of the right to speak, the member for Langley acknowledged this inherent limitation and spoke more precisely of the equal right to speak. It is this qualifier of rights, equity, that carries great significance and to which the Chair must pay close attention. En d'autres mots, le député de Langley demande à la présidence si la pratique selon laquelle les whips lui fournissent la liste des députés censés obtenir la parole durant les déclarations de députés constitue une constrainte injuste à sa liberté de parole, dans la mesure où il ne se voit pas accorder de façon équitable l'occasion de prendre la parole. There is no denying that close collaborations has developed over time between the Chair and party whips to find ways to use the time of the House as efficiently as possible and to ensure that all parties are treated equitably in apportioning speaking time. In some cases, the timing of recorded divisions come to mind. The standing orders enshrine a specific role for the whips. In other cases, there is no standing order, but rather a body of practice that the House follows and that evolves over time. A reading of the history of member statements at pages 420 to 422 in O'Brien and Bosque tells us that our practice in that regard has had to adjust and respond to changing circumstances on more than one occasion, with each practice enduring only so long as it matched its era and the will of the House. By 1982, it had settled into what we know it to be today. That is, the order and number of slots to be allotted to members of different political affiliations are agreed upon by the parties at the beginning of a parliament and adjusted from time to time as necessary. Then at each sitting, the names of members who are to fill the designated speaking slots are provided to the Speaker by the whips of the different recognized parties and by the independent members. Even if not enshrined in the standing orders, generally the House has been well served by this collaboration, and the lists have helped the Chair to preside over this portion of each sitting day in an orderly fashion. But does this mean that the Chair has ceded its authority to decide which members are to be recognized? To answer this question, it is perhaps useful to review the history of the lists, which were first used for question period in the 1970s. At page 61 in his memoir, Mr. Speaker, in which he describes his time in the chair, Speaker Jerome explains that he was comfortable using a party's suggested list, quote, so long as it didn't unfairly squeeze out their backbench, unquote. In a June 19, 1991 ruling found at page 2072 of the debate, Speaker Fraser was even more categorical about the authority of the chair. In response to a member who asked if the chair was bound to follow a set list in recognizing members, he said, quote, I appreciate the honourable member's intervention, and my answer is yes, there is a list. I am not bound by it. I can ignore that list and intervene to allow private members, wherever they are, not only to ask questions, but also to ask supplementals. That is a right which remains with the chair, and I do not think it has ever been seriously challenged. I would remind all honourable members that it is a right which the chair has had almost since the memory of man runneth not to the contrary, unquote. The authority the Speaker has in this regard is likewise described in House of Commons Procedure and Practice, second edition at page 318, which states, no member may speak in the House until called upon or recognized by the Speaker. Any member so recognized may speak during debate, questions and comments periods, question period, and other proceedings of the House. Various conventions and informal arrangements exist to encourage the participation of all parties in debate. Nevertheless, the decision as to who may speak is ultimately the speaker's, unquote. It further states on page 595 that, quote, although the whips of the various parties each provide the chair with a list of members wishing to speak, the chair is not bound by these, unquote. De la même façon, il est écrit à la page 181 de la jurisprudence parlementaire de Beauchesne, 6e édition, et je cite, il appartient en dernier ressort aux présidences de décider de l'ordre dans lequel les orateurs se succéderont à la Chambre. Fin de la citation. J'ai moi-même jugé bon de m'écarter des listes à quelques occasions, le plus souvent afin de maintenir l'ordre et le décorum pendant les déclarations de députés et la période des questions. Accordingly, the chair has to conclude, based on this review of our procedural authorities and other references, that its authority to decide who is recognized to speak is indisputable and has not been trumped by the use of lists, as some members have seemed to suggest. I might add as an aside that the use of lists in general has inadvertently created an ongoing problem for the chair. In some cases, members do not stand to be recognized because they are on a list and thus think they will automatically be recognized when their turn comes around. As Acting Speaker Bob Kilger put it in a statement found at page 3925 of the debates on May 5th, 1994, quote, we speak about or refer to these unofficial lists that we have, which are somewhat helpful at times, but in the end, members seeking the floor, of course, are those who will be recognized by the chair, unquote. Thus, the need to catch the speaker's eye, as it is called, continues to underpin the chair's authority in this respect. Members are free, for instance, to seek the floor under questions and comments at any time to make their views known. They're also free at any time to seek the floor to intervene in debate itself on a bill or motion before the House. Ultimately, it is up to each individual member to decide how frequently he or she wishes to seek the floor, knowing that being recognized by the Speaker is not always a guaranteed proposition. The right to seek the floor at any time is the right of each individual member of Parliament and is not dependent on any other member of Parliament. Now, on the narrow question of the removal of the member for Langley from his party's lineup for statements by members on March 20th, the chair cannot conclude that there is a prima facie finding of privilege. No evidence has been presented to me that the member has been systematically prevented from seeking the floor. The chair has found that the member for Langley has been active under several rubrics since the beginning of this Parliament. He has made statements under statements by members on a variety of subjects. He has presented petitions. He has made speeches and has risen on occasion on questions and comments under government orders. He has made speeches under private members' business, and he has risen in question period. And as I said earlier, he has remained free to seek the floor at any time, like all other members. However, on the broader question of the equitable distribution of statements by members, a review of the statistics reveals that the member may well have a legitimate concern. This goes to the unquestionable duty of the Speaker to act as the guardian of the rights and privileges of members and of the House as an institution. This includes ensuring that, over time, no member wishing to speak is unfairly prevented from doing so. Even so, as Speaker, I cannot exercise my discretion as to which member to recognize during statements by members or at any other time of the sitting day if only one member is rising to be recognized. As previously mentioned, due to an over-reliance on lists, more often than should be the case, even those members on the list do not always rise to be recognized. Were the chair to be faced with choices of which member to recognize at any given time, then of course the chair would exercise its discretion. That has not happened thus far during statements by members, nor for that matter during question period. Until it does, the chair is not in a position to unilaterally announce or dictate a change in our practices. If members want to be recognized, they will have to actively demonstrate that they wish to participate. They have to rise in their places and seek the floor. In the meantime, I will continue to be guided by the lists that are provided to me, and when and if members are competing for the floor, will exercise my authority to recognize members, not in a cavalier or uninformed manner, but rather in a balanced way that respects both the will of the House and the rights of individual members. I would like to thank all honourable members for their attention during this rather lengthy ruling.